Dick Cheney, a former US Vice President and chief architect of what became known as the War on Terror and helped lead America and its allies into the ill-fated Iraq War, has died. He was aged 84. Cheney served alongside Republican President George W. Bush Jr. for 2 terms between 2001 and 2009. His family confirming his death via a statement. Let's cross now to Fraser Jackson, who's in Washington, D.C. Fraser, this man was a deeply polarising figure in American politics, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, after a political career that spanned almost 5 decades, Dick Cheney, the man once dubbed the most powerful vice president in history, has died at the age of 84. Cheney held more cabinet positions than almost any other American, but his national political career began as a congressional fellow before becoming President Gerald Ford's chief of staff in 1975. It was in 1979 that he became the representative of Wyoming in the U.S. House of Representatives, winning 5 re-elections to stay in that post until 1989. And it was then when he became Secretary of Defense for President George H.W. Bush until January 1993, when he oversaw the U.S. invasion of Panama, as well as Operation Desert Storm earlier in his tenure as well. That was a conflict which would deeply inform his views on military intervention, but also begin what would become a checkered legacy regarding the Middle East. It was indeed, though, his 8 years as Vice President under George H.W. Bush's son that cemented his place in history. Serving under George W. Bush and following the 9/11 attacks, Cheney really became a chief architect of the Bush Doctrine, pushing for robust executive power alongside the charge for the invasion of Iraq as well. His support for that invasion, as well as the global war on terror, also surveillance and so-called enhanced interrogation techniques, that earned him praise from supporters who saw him as a necessary realist in the administration, but it also drew sharp criticism from detractors who accused him of fundamentally altering the balance of power in government. In the wake of 9/11, his approval stood at 68% whilst vice president, but when he left office 8 years later, in 2009, he'd become a much more polarising figure, with his approval sinking to 13%. Since leaving office, though, he has become more critical of the trajectory of the modern Republican Party, including now President Donald Trump. He even went so far as to endorse Kamala Harris in the 2024 presidential election. And his daughter, Liz Cheney, of course, even campaigned alongside Kamala Harris, having supported the impeachment of Donald Trump. So a checkered legacy from Dick Cheney, who has now died aged 84, but certainly one of the most consequential vice presidents in US history.
Thank you for that, Fraser Jackson. And just repeating those news that Dick Cheney, the former Vice President, has died at the age of 84.